Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table. Welcome back. My name is Seth Krussman.
I'm Ben Brayshaw.
We're Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. You can also find us at Facebook /3D Investing and Twitter, folks. I always love to throw that one out there. Look me up, Seth Krussman, BFG_LLC. Three-dimensional investing. I think this is one of the things that kind of comes up. I had a great time this last week running hood to coast, and one of my buddies get this a lot. Like, people have no idea that we're doing financial radio, and we've been doing it for a couple of years, or have this podcast out there. And he took a look at the logo and 3D investing. He was like, "What's that? What's 3D investing?" Ben, give me what you got on that.
It's kind of like not just three-dimensional, but it's like multi-universe, because you have all sorts of dimensions, both on the types of investing that you do with, whether it's, brokerage, fee-based planning, insurance, any of those different concepts. But then you have like dimensions inside each one of those. And think of those as each having their own individual sphere of purpose, importance, relevance. And when you bring it all together, you see a picture, like a live video, or even more so, like you're standing there watching your financial life. But a lot of people have that one dimension where they pick up a statement and they say, I have no idea what I own here, what this represents, if it's doing what it should do, or if it's doing what it shouldn't do, or if I'm investing in something I should or shouldn't be investing in, right? When it comes to investing, you need to understand all the different pieces and layers, because it's not only three-dimensional in a perpendicular line of three different items in distance, one closer, one farther away, and one, off to the right or the left. It's not only that, but there's north and there's south, there's east, there's west, there's degrees of those things, and there's a whole sphere of moving pieces. And understanding those things, one of the things I'm really excited about today is we're going to talk about one of the dimensions, as I would call it, on the investment horizon, which is we have three dimensions. We have investment objectives, time horizon, and risk tolerance. And that's a three-dimensional piece in its own right, in understanding how those connect and come together. And I think I'm really excited because we're going to do the first dimension, which is probably the most relevant for a lot of people right off the bat, is risk tolerance today. This show is going to talk to you about risk, how to think about risk, how to understand risk, and how to appreciate and live inside the right risk.
You promised me we're going to have some fun with this today, right?
I did. I'm going to have some good fun with this because I love risk.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I want our listeners to email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're talking riskiest thing you've done. Normal, like jumped out of a helicopter, if you've flown your own plane without a license. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I mean, I'm not talking about inappropriate things. I'm talking about if you have something that's just crazy risky, I want you to email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Before we jump into our real story about risk and really having some fun with that and some understanding of it, we have money in the news. Well, Seth, one of the first articles we have today, we have two articles. I'm pretty excited about both of them because they're really important articles. And there's a lot of fear going on in our environment, in the investment world, right? We're talking recession. I mean, you turn on the news, next thing you know, the market's going up and they're talking recession. You turn on the news again, it's down 800 points, they're talking recession again. It doesn't matter what direction they're going, we're hearing recession. And the question a lot of people have is, why? What's happening? I'm hearing earnings are up, retail sales are double. There's all sorts of different great pieces happening in the marketplace. But what is causing these recession fears? And a lot of it has to do with the bond market, okay? This week, the yield curve inverted, okay? It hit a 30-year record low, Okay. I think it actually was almost the lowest it's ever been. And, it's dropped below 2%. And that's a very scary time. The last time this type of story started happening was 2009. Okay. At the very bottom, like recession, everything was in recession. The events were happening. This was kind of an event inside the recession we were experiencing. And so this is a very recessionary trigger that a lot of people are watching. And a lot of people don't understand, is this really relevant today or not?
Right. One of the things that has been said around investing, some of the four most expensive words in investing are, this time it's different. And that was Sir John Templeton. One of the most predictive triggers that we have, or factoids that we can look at to try to predict what's going to be possibly happening, is that yield curve in the 10-year. And so yesterday the spread inverted at closing to what the greatest it's been 1 or 2 years before the most recent falling recession. But the thing that's interesting around that is that this can happen, but then we can also see a period of a lot of push in the market forward before it ever turns around. So is it predictive in the way that we would like it to be, where we see the recessionary factors starting to take place and the market totally takes a dump after the inversion? Or is it something more like we're looking in the future a couple of years down the road and we could see a huge push in the market still? But historically, we've seen a lot of pushes in the market post inversions.
Yeah, I know. And if the biggest problem around this yield curve change is that this is the first time since 2009 that the S&P 500 dividend spread, is actually yielding more than the 30-year Treasury bond. That's a big whoa. So I think what's interesting is we're seeing like recessionary trigger, and a bunch of different areas. But then we're seeing all these really positive symbols that don't really reflect recession. And we're seeing, earnings are strong, unemployment's down. Some of these things that we've already talked about. But when you start seeing, hey, my bond yields are lower than what I can get in the equities on the 30-year. I should just move to equities because that's something I need. Now, we've talked about demographic investing. Demographic investing is focusing on where the demographics are going, where the money's moving. And a lot of people are watching the baby boomers invest trillions of dollars and start moving trillions of dollars to things that are both considered safer and produce yield. And so when you're chasing yield, which is all about your income and the baby boomer income, they're fighting to get as much income as they can. And when all of a sudden the Treasury's low, these are things that people are concerned about because they're like, well, do I go into equities or am I going to be hurt there? What does that look like? But yet I need the income. This is a big deal.
Yeah, and part of the conversation here is, where do you have your money? Location. You have this understanding, you have this relationship, and we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about risk and the relationship that you have with that risk. What part of your portfolio is in that part of the market that is experiencing this risk? Not all risk is the same. If you already have identified and understood that this is a part of where you're going, your journey, then I don't think you should be moving off of your equities into your bond allocations unless that's the strategy that you've already chosen ahead of time to move that direction and that's tactical investing, which we do quite a bit of and we believe in. It works. It's a vehicle that works for a purpose. And that purpose, when we put it into place for those specific times, that's what we're looking to do. But the majority of the market is reacting in a way that says it hasn't planned, or it's going back into the equities in a way, trying to get that last bump, that last push to get more.
How many people are chasing the market? They're chasing the market. They're just chasing it after one thing after another. Next thing you know, here yield was here. And it's really hard not to have that emotional connection to your assets and to stay patient and to evaluate that. And it's one of those crazy things. The market has been all over the place. I bet you the majority of our listeners right now today don't know what the number one performing asset class was last year. Cash was the best performer for 2018.
Yeah.
And then bonds was the second best performer, and it was barely positive at 0.01% or 1 basis point, as we call it. Everything else was negative. These are types of things that from these classes that people don't understand. And the news is so unfair to what's going on in the market. And we're watching this. But the thing is, depending on your risk correlation, your 2019 yield could be great, but your 2018 yield could be horrible. And those are the types of things it's trying to evaluate that and try to get through that process and understand both, am I taking equidistant risk to the equidistant return I want to get? And 2008 was a real refresher for a lot of people who were just kind of cusping that retirement period of saying, or had just retired, of being knocked out. It's bad. I mean, they were like, I have to go back to work. I just lost a ton of money. I had no idea what kind of risk I was taking in this portfolio. I'd been averaging a decent return. I could have taken money out. I just lost 38%. I just lost 52%. And everyone's saying all the triggers we have in front of us are recession in 2 years. Do I know if there's a recession? I have no idea. Do I invest according to what my risk tolerance is? Yeah, I do.
Well, if that doesn't get you super excited and having fun so far in our show.
Well, if you're depressed and you need some drugs, Johnson & Johnson's got something for you.
Yeah, Johnson & Johnson was ordered to pay $572 million. Just under $500 million.
Yeah, the state of Oklahoma. I mean, they got crushed. This is not the end. This is just Oklahoma suing.
Yeah, there's a whole, huge class action going on. State of Oklahoma shot across the bow here, folks, where they're holding the company for producing the drug in toast to the fire here and saying, no, you're the pusher. You're the problem.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal did a good job on this on their August 27th article on Tuesday about how to understand what was going on with opioids. So the accusation here is that, Johnson & Johnson is pushing opioids, unfairly. I mean, basically forcing the sale really and had minimized the potential addiction problem associated with these pills. And just to give you an idea, in 2015 in Oklahoma, more than 326 million opioid pills were dispensed. That would equate to 110 pills per every adult in the state in a year. That's crazy.
That is. That's and think of how many people are actually consuming the drugs or using, or getting prescribed these drugs in the state. It's, I don't know, even if you were to take a fraction of that and say 10%, and I think that would be pretty high. There's a whole lot of folks that are getting opioids prescribed. And when the argument that comes up with that is, hey, we are providing a product or a service that is important for people and their pain management, which is clearly the initial intention of those drugs, but it's been abused. And a friend of mine here that I was telling you about, Ben, that was a pharmaceutical rep, and he saw what was going on in his industry with the trips and the incentives for doctors, or basically people that are prescribing the drugs, to sway their prescriptions towards their company and influence them to write more prescriptions their direction than whatever the competition might be, which doesn't seem like such a bad thing. But he was seeing a misuse and an abuse there, and he raised his hand and said, this isn't okay. And that was the end of his career.
One of the arguments Johnson & Johnson made, and in New Hampshire, this is really close to home, is the concept that fentanyl and heroin were actually the cause of most of the deaths and problems and stuff like that. And then the reverse argument is a lot of people got on this stuff by using these opioid drugs, unable to get enough to deal with their addiction issues. So they moved to these hardcore drug, right? And there's no way to prove that. But one of the things that was said in this article, to quote, the judge said in the ruling that Johnson & Johnson's misleading marketing, including unbranded campaigns jointly developed with other companies that suggested pain was undertreated, and that higher amounts of opioid prescriptions were the solution. The state said the company's actions created a, quote, public nuisance, and asked the judge to award as much as $17 billion to abate the cost of the crisis. Because the thing is the amount of cost of the state, both in various aid, whether it's food stamps, it's everything under the sun that people who are suffering from addictions, who have lost jobs. This is something that I know people who we've worked with at other companies who. And I was randomly talking to somebody. I knew this woman, and she had worked for one of the financial companies we had worked with, and we were talking with a gentleman, and he said they were going to hire her away from this other company, didn't hire her, and his partner ran into her on the street. She said hi to him. he didn't know who it was, and she was a drug addict. And my understanding was it was led by opioids, and seeking the next. I mean, just completely wiped out her family, her whole life. I mean, it's just very sad. But he didn't even recognize her. She was so debilitated in her how she looked and everything.
Yeah, it's a huge conversation. It's a very sad, very, very sad situation for a lot of people that don't even know what's happening. It's under their noses, and it comes in the form of a safe place, the doctor's office, a method that we accept. But the addictive nature here, Rush Limbaugh, another example right there.
Right.
The addictive nature, it is no...
it's not a keeper of persons, right?
It's not a respecter of persons.
And,
no.
It says here that in the last almost 20 years, 6,000 Oklahomans have died from opioid abuse since 2000. Those are the proven cases of opioid deaths. Nearly 400,000 overdosed for the last almost 20 years federally. Now, think about what this is going to do in the financial world for the pharma. And I already know, like, I've had back surgery. I've had a lot of, significant ailments. And,
you are the robo-advisor of us.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this saying to myself, they don't give these pills out easily. I mean, like, I had major back surgery and have had suffered, and they're not just tossing these pills out.
Just handing you Tylenol to get over it.
Yeah, they're like, suck it up. This is your baby. I'm like, you just cut through my spine, So, this is not so. I'm just amazed at the amount of accessibility that there must be in some other direction. So, to me, I'm just concerned about. I think Johnson & Johnson in the marketing, I am of the understanding that the opioid addiction is not as clearly communicated in my own mind, just from a consumer perspective. But I'm just wondering where the other abuse is coming from, because to have 110 pills per adult every year available in Oklahoma, somebody else is screwing up here. And what's the management behind that too? I know that they've created some, but...
Well, $500 million going in the direction of... We want to end this on a good... Don't we? We want to make... I promised you fun, and I haven't quite figured out how to spin this into fun yet, but I'm gonna say $500 million is basically dedicated towards the education and the treatment centers and the purpose of really helping to come into these communities that are being devastated by this addiction. And
this is not the end. That's gonna.
No.
I mean, you think about 6,000 deaths compared to 400,000 deaths.
Yeah.
And, the other 394,000 deaths are going to be accounted for in a various number of other states, I'm sure. So we have not heard the end of this story.
Yeah, and I think the statistic also here is just an awareness factor of that we all know somebody right now that is suffering from an addiction just like this, and we have no idea who they are, and just coming alongside of them and letting if there's ever an opportunity to come alongside of them and let them know that you care, that you love them, and that that there's help. Well, maybe not fun, but guess what's next? We're going to talk about risk in your life, in your portfolio, in what that looks like. And it's a really fun topic for us, a really fun conversation. It's what we're going to be talking about when we come back. You are listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551.
Hi, my name is Seth Krussman, partner with Brayshaw Financial Group and one of the co-hosts of Money on Tap. One of the biggest concerns and largest expenses people face today is taxes. Without thoughtful planning, taxes can destroy future retirement dollars, eliminating the possibility of a timely retirement or dreams of what you want retirement to look like. If you're like most people, you're getting closer and closer to retirement, and you may be wondering if you're taking the right steps. Will my income be enough? Will rising taxes force me to give up my dreams? How does inflation factor into all of this? These are real concerns, and you're not alone. Putting a plan around your financial future is what we do. If you have questions when it comes to your financial security, and if you're looking for a personalized solution, contact us at Brayshaw Financial Group, 855-226-8551. It's time for you to start getting answers to your questions. Headquartered in Bedford, New Hampshire, Brayshaw Financial has offices across the country. We'd love the opportunity to show you how we can help. There's absolutely no cost or obligation to meet with us. Call us at 855-226-8551. 855-226-8551.
Now back to Money on Tap with Ben and Seth.
Welcome back. You are listening to Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we're talking about here on this show is personal finance, three-dimensional investing, trying to understand and relate, bring clarity to in each person's individual financial planning journey is risk. When exploring risk, there can be some really fun stories. Ben, I know you have a couple. What is one of your most risky endeavors?
You know, I'm going to go back to, I was about 19 years old. I went on a missions trip. I remember when Czechoslovakia was going through its separation, and I was going on a missions trip to Hungary, and we ended up having to drive through Czechoslovakian border. And I remember these guys coming on with like AK-47s, and I mean, they were strapping some serious armor here and military weaponry. And we were at this border, and they took our passports. And I just remember like kind of moment of woe is how I would call it. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm really a U.S. citizen right now. Like, these guys could just toast me, and bury me in some bag. No one would ever know other than I just disappeared. I don't know how risky that was or wasn't, but that's the first thing that comes to mind when you actually ask that question. But I'm sure there's something even more risky and dumb I've done in my life too. I think of my brother John pretty often when I think of high risk items and cutting trees and growing up on a farm.
Well, now that actually makes me want to tell a story about you when I was over there visiting, and I think we were having a birthday party for you, which
oh no,
but you had this tree out. It was off to the side of your driveway, and it was completely bent over. But this is summertime, right? This is early summer, and this tree is just bent over. And I don't know what you guys do. What happens in the winters there that takes like a deciduous tree and just completely bends the whole thing over in an arc, like snow and ice and thaw and ice, more ice or something. But you get all geared up with your chainsaw and your pants and all your
safety first.
Safety gear out there to tackle this thing. And you're sawing away and chainsawing away on this tree, and I just hear a snap.
Widowmaker.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that tree flew.
Yeah. It was like it was completely loaded up and just had all that energy compressed into every fiber of that tree. And when Ben was sawing through it, it snapped and came so close to taking him away from us folks.
Yeah, no, it did.
But that was a risk you didn't know, right? I mean, well, it was you took the precaution in it, but
yeah, I did all the correct mechanical methods of working on that tree, and but it still did it was probably one of the most I probably should have just called somebody and had someone come in with a protective gear and stuff like that. But growing up on a farm and doing that stuff as a kid, we grew up on a pretty dangerous farm. My parents let us do a lot of stuff. I mean, gosh, my brother John, when he was a young teenager, he accidentally cut off my brother's hand with a chainsaw. 4 of his fingers, and good old Concord Orthopedics sewed it back on for him. That was 40 years ago or something like that.
Wow.
9-10 hours of surgery. So I grew up with some kind of like very risky farm-like, classic, bad story scenarios. So, some of the risk stuff, I probably have a litany of these stories. I mean, more are coming to mind as I think of my brother John, who I love dearly, but he is a crazy, crazy guy, and he doesn't really evaluate risk the way most people do. But I'll leave it at that. But we talk about risk all the time with our clients, and most people sit there and you're probably listening to us and you're wondering, risk. Yeah, I risk. The stock market's risky, and what does that mean? But there's degrees of risk, and then there's types of risk, and there's evaluating both of those together. But there's what we would say there's about 5 risks in this world, okay? And you're probably dealing with a number of those risks on a daily basis, but some of them may not even apply to you. But probably the one that we have here is number 1 is strategic risk, mostly, right, Seth, this happens with, business owners. They're making investments for their organization. They're deciding on, missions and objectives and what they're trying to accomplish.
So before we start heading down this road of all the different types of risk and what those are, I think it's important to try to understand what is risk and who tells us what risk is. What is the paradigm that we have to try to operate under and understand, communicate through, and good things, right? So FINRA stands for Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. This is one of the places you can go to our website and you can click on FINRA and find out all about Ben and all about me and the advisors at Brayshaw Financial Group. And but they're really the supervisory body out there that are regulatory authority in our industry. And what they say, this is a good place to go to ask them what is risk. And what they say about risk is when you invest, you make choices about what you do with your financial assets, right? Risk is any uncertainty with respect to your investments that has the potential to negatively affect your financial welfare. Okay. And then they go on to give an example of that. You invest, your investment value might rise or fall because of market conditions. That's market risk. Corporate decisions, such as whether to expand into a new area of business or merge with other companies, can affect the value of your investments, and that's business risk. And we're going to talk a little bit about those. Just a couple examples, but that's kind of the mode that we're going to be operating through here, and that's
but Seth,
it's good to understand.
Isn't risk, directly correlated to reward?
Ooh. Modern portfolio theory would say yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, right? So everyone hears, oh, you take more risk, you make more reward. Well, that works in Vegas. That's pretty standard in Vegas, right? So, the highest risk bet on the table, is to lay all your chips on a single number, a single color, and hope the roulette wheel lands on that one particular spot. Or you could choose red or black, and hopefully it lands on one of those colors, right? And so, but the higher the risk, right, the more the reward in that example. Now, for some of our listeners, they don't gamble, and that's okay. But you've probably all seen a good Western movie with that kind of thing going on. So, where do we ascertain whether the amount of risk and the amount of reward correlate equally? And the problem is there is no answer, I don't believe, to that. I believe that, we can look at the theories, we can look at this, we can look at that, but the truth is that sometimes in the investment world, we're taking risk that we have no idea how truly vulnerable we could be, because all the statistics say that this risk will equal that kind of reward, we think, or we hope. Or but there's so many different things. We just talked about the 30-year Treasury and dropping to all-time lows, and we've talked about all these different things. And it's like, well, if you own the Treasury, goodness gracious, that could be a huge problem for you now if you need to buy the Treasury. These are types of investment risks that you have, and I think that's one of the things that people need to understand risk better, so that they can understand the dynamics of the risk, both on the kind of the North Pole side and the South Pole side, and try to have an understanding. But the truth is that any market investment has a full value of potential loss on any asset you pretty much buy.
Yeah,
right. So there is kind of like this ultimate risk on anything.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think risk needs to kind of be broken down through a couple of different modes for us, right? Because there's the what we would call a capacity for risk, and when we're working with clients and we're taking a look at, what is your goal, and a lot of the time that means equal income, right? So what is your goal? What do you need? And that you're going to have, whatever your need for income is going to be in future at age 65. That's just throw an arbitrary number out there. Maybe it's sooner, maybe it's later, just really a number. And that maybe you need $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, whatever that is, because that's your lifestyle and that's where you want to be. That's really that is a number that we take off the table in terms of risk. And that's that capacity for risk, because you know that you will not be okay living below whatever that number is. You don't, I mean, if given the option to put, that number on the table at Las Vegas or wherever you want to go, put that number on the table and possibly, get a higher number, right? Or lose 25%. Are you okay with that? Typically, no. Most of the time, that number is really kind of set in stone around your life, where you're at. So that's the capacity for risk piece. And that is pretty much a zero in terms of most people. And that's the first solve that we try to address in terms of the risk equation. And after that, we want to take a look at, that's more who you are in the risk profile piece and in terms of you as a person. And then the other types of risk that start to get layered in here, and how risk on or risk off we are in that approach. And that market piece is typically going to say equities are going to be higher risk and bonds are going to be lower risk. But really that even depends on, if you want to go back earlier into this show, we're talking about a yield curve and the bonds. Yep. And how is that different from, where it was a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I mean, you've got all these different pieces to risk and understanding risk. And I think that's one of the things when we break it down with you, when you come in to our office or we talk with, people who just call for just some generic understanding of what's going on. Like, we have people come in and say, I've got this retirement plan and I'm just scared to death after listening to you, what to do and how to invest. I mean, we've sat down with people left and right, just kind of walking through things that we're not even going to be able to manage for them, but just giving them some generic understanding of what they really have, kind of like a big brother or an uncle, something sitting down with you and trying to give you some perspective on life, because people feel so powerless and they feel like the 10 or 15 minute 401k conversation from the guy 5 or 10 years ago, and every phone call they call into an 800 number, they're lost. And so when we break down risk, it's really important to help them understand the different types of risk and so forth. But before, we kind of like jump into, the 3 ways of like managing risk, I think we should talk about the types of risks. Seth, what do you think?
All right. Hey, strategic risk. So these are risks that arise from investments on an organization or in an organization.
These are the risks we take every day. I mean, like, these are the ones where, we're deciding, like, are we going to go and invest in a building for our business, or we're going to, we're going to spend money on this marketing campaign. These are strategic risks that are traditionally found in that business. Are we going to, the acquisition, the
right, transactions,
yeah, like
the buys, the sells.
One of our listeners might be evaluating is like, do I buy this house? That would be kind of a comparable analysis to, this is how I would use that as a general investor person, is just strategic risk.
Nice. Number 2, financial risk.
Basically all your economic decisions, right? So the financial risk could be just how you invest in your investments, changes in the interest rate, how your taxes are evaluated or how much you get taxed. These are all the financial pieces around your life, like just inflation in general. Like that's a financial risk that you take in the cost of milk every day, right? I mean, those are the types of things.
Right. Yeah. Cost of living fluctuations in that education. Do you use different vehicles around, funding education? Number 3, operational risk. These risks are basically choices about design, use of process to create, deliver goods and services. Yeah. They can include production errors, substandard raw materials, technology malfunctions. I like Nike, and I don't know if you've read Shoe Dog, but that's Phil Knight. That's his autobiography. He talks about the Nike Air and the first Nike Air that hit the market. They had so many new technologies going into that shoe, but the air soles wind up popping because of the metal that was in one of the paints that was used in the shoe, and it wound up cutting through the air soles. So they had to like pull back and recall all of that first version of Nike Airs. But through the operational risk right there is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, this is running your life. This is running your business. This is the risk of, who's picking up the kids. Like, this is the everyday. This is the operational risk of your life. Number 4 is kind of like the obvious one once it's said, right? The legal risk.
Yes.
The legal risk of your life, just all the different things that can happen. It's like the car insurance story. When Eric handles all of our property and casualty stuff here on the show, he handles it for our company. And, one of the things about that is like, well, are you insured if you, God forbid, hit a bus of school children? I mean, like there's so many legal risks surrounding our lives and, what you need and how it's handled, like just the car insurance. I mean, the home, the auto, I mean, all that stuff is just such a big part of where the legal pieces come into play. But if you're a business owner, you got customers, you got employees, you got suppliers, you've got all sorts of different pieces inside that legal world that you're concerned about when you own a business.
What about market risk? I mean, this is kind of going to I think we're going to start to nail down some of the more specific things when we talk about the investment world. Those are some very general risks that we just kind of want to broad brush there. But one of the most common that we bring into the conversation here is market risk. And what does that mean? When you have that 401k that you've got out there, or your IRA, typically IRA, let's just say that you have an index fund, and it's bought the broader market, or it's expressing itself as the larger S&P 500 market, and that is the market in terms of market risk. And that exposure is basically you have zero control over that, is what that is saying. And there is fluctuation, and you can have a greater fluctuation depending on what you own in that vehicle.
See that,
or potentially a lesser.
Right there, Seth. Though, I mean, it's exactly right on what you own, and that's the thing. When we actually sit down with people, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll ask people, I'll be like, "So, what did you invest here?" And they're like, "Oh, well, you have the statement in your hand." So I'll be like, "No, I know I do, and I know what I'm looking at. I want to know what you think you're looking at, or what you've seen, or what you did and why you did it." And the majority of people say, I have no idea. And that's totally fair and honest, and I love the transparency. And then some people are a little bit more versed and they think, well, I bought the S&P 500, or, when I sat down, I really looked at this, time date fund, and I felt like that was a good thing. And I'm like, well, do you know how they're investing and what the allocations are and the shifting? And they're like, yeah, I know a little bit of it. Some people do. Most people don't. And that's okay. Like that's not to be expected. Like when people sit down with me, I don't expect them to know anything. Like I always assume that we're starting from scratch, but I like to always get a good litmus test of, how much you understand about the market. And I would say invariably, Seth, less than 2%, 5%, I don't know what the number would be, but it's astronomically low of how many people really know or have an intentional, mode around their investments and what that risk correlates to for them, and that it's on. I mean, even if they know what they own, even just to correlate the risk, like we'll put them through a risk tolerance questionnaire. We have a risk program. If you're listening right now, it's totally free. Go to BrayshawFinancial.com. Go to, was it About Us? I think, no, it's, under About, I can't even remember.
We should be able to tell you this right out of the gate.
Well, it's there, but I mean, people are listening, and it's totally.
Or if you don't want to go to the website, just go ahead and send us an email at info@BrayshawFinancial.com or info@yourmoneyontap.com, and we can send you basically a risk profile questionnaire and get access to the software to be able to upload your portfolios and whatever you have going on currently to be able to test it out. Yeah,
you can go to About Us, and you go down to Our Services, and right below at the very bottom it says Free Portfolio Risk Analysis, and that is a really very interesting thing. You can literally put in exactly what you own and get a risk score 0 to 100.
That's cool.
And it's really a fantastic piece. We help so many people get a good understanding of what they own, but when we talk about market risk is something that's really hard to ascertain because it's so fluid. It's so moving on a daily basis. And I love the fact that we have tools that can evaluate historical risk, kind of, modern portfolio theory, all the things you're talking about, Seth, and really drive home a number to give somebody a target, just even a baseline.
Right.
Just to have some comparative analysis, even if it's not perfect, just to have, I mean, I've had people who said, hey, I'm an 80 risk, like, go for it, baby. I want real market returns. I'm willing to watch the market tumble if it is. And I look at that as a buying opportunity to double down. We have those people. And then we have people who say, listen, I don't want to lose much. 5 or 10%, I start getting real nervous on where the market's going. And I need to watch out for that. Mm-hmm. But then we throw their portfolio in there and they're 75. And they have no idea that they're really testing out emotionally at a 30, maybe 35 or 40. And those are the types of things that bringing some comparative, understanding to that is really, really healthy and kind of relieving to a lot of people to know, hey, listen, we understand your risk and we're going to pull that into focus and align that with your objectives and your time horizon and really get you on something directed toward what you need.
I got a question. So does volatility mean a loss? Because we're talking about risk, and that's the volatility, right? The greater the risk, the higher the volatility, I think, is one of those correlations, and that would line up with that risk, that risk number and that aligning of our risk, who we are. But I think there needs to be maybe a little bit of understanding or articulation around that. In terms of a loss, does volatility mean a loss?
Volatility means movement. Volatility includes gains and losses, because if it was just straight loss, it would be recession, right? If it was just straight gain, it would be a bull market. And but volatility is the disparity, that standard deviation between the north and the south, the kind of the peaks and the troughs. Like volatility is like the swing, right? The ups and the downs and the ups and the downs. If you're just up and then you go down and you just keep going down, it's not volatile, it's just negative.
Yeah.
But it's the repetitive movement of the market. And I think a lot of people get scared about that. So a lot of things about volatility is risk management and mitigating risk and understanding that, because when you're looking at standard deviation, which is that the north and south, as I describe it to most people, in your portfolio, it's kind of like trying to say, hey, listen, we want to shrink that southern deviation piece. We don't want it to be a negative 10 historically for you when the down is down. We want that to be a negative 5, but your north point, we don't want it to be a 10 or 12. We want it to be a 15, right? We want that deviation to kind of move up on the positive bar. So I think those are the types of things that we try to work through with clients, is try to understand what they can absorb. And I think that's where tactical management comes in pretty healthy. In this marketplace, tactical management has not performed well, or even at all, but the volatility has been reduced pretty significantly. And that's what's really interesting about tactical, is waiting for it to perform.
And I think there's an interesting part of that too, where the volatility really, it could mean a loss. And how it would look like a loss for you is if you sell and if you need income. And that's the portion around that tactical solution in decreasing volatility can really solve over the life of developing income outside of other vehicles that may not have like an exposure to that volatility piece. And so pairing those assets with some things like time horizon, that's one of the other parts that we talk about in terms of how much risk can you take on. What is your time horizon? And in really aligning and matching those stories together to know that the income, or you're not going to be basically part of your story, part of your portfolio might very well be the S&P 500, but you're not taking income if that portfolio is down 20%, because that's catastrophic in negative sequence, what we call negative sequence of returns, and what you have to accomplish to get back to even in that story.
The negative sequence of returns is really something that, we've done shows on, that compounded loss scenario, taking income and then seeing a market loss and then taking income and still seeing another market loss, because you don't have the same amount of money in there to regrow your assets. And that's a tragic way to die, which is why, and I mean that figuratively, obviously, but that is why the distribution phase of retirement is so complicated and why you need a financial planner to help you through it. I mean, people have been growing their assets in 401ks because they can sit there and forget about it for decades. But, it's when you're actually doing the distribution and that negative sequence of returns that creates so much trouble. And I think that's where we come into, the three types of ways of dealing with risk, and the part that we have labeled here, which is really interesting, which is number one is just to accept that risk, just to push and say, forget about it. I'm down 10%. I'm taking my 5% out in income, and I'm just going to hope for a better return and expect that will outperform the market. And or I don't need all this money anyways. There's plenty to live off of, and 1 year down is not going to matter. Just kind of accepting that risk is totally a normal way of life. And I find, Seth, that a lot of people who have lived in that kind of set it and forget it mentality, in that kind of accumulation phase, that pre-retirement phase, they're still kind of thinking that way in the distribution phase. But then they start to kind of mentally understand that negative sequence of returns and how taking income and down markets can complicate the ability to recover assets. And it becomes something that they don't want to accept. I can't tell you how many people come to me after they've retired, after they've started taking income, and say, I just need a guaranteed income.
Yeah.
And I was listening to the TV the other day, and some guy was on saying, his company will never sell annuities or this, that, or the other thing. It's like, if you'll ever rule out any one investment, no matter what it is, I just don't think that that's a prudent way of looking at the market. I've never met an investment that was bad, unless it was a Ponzi scheme. But I mean, I've never met an investment that's bad. I've just met appropriate or inappropriate investment for somebody, or suitable or unsuitable. For some people, they just want income, and income might not be an annuity. It might be a CD. I mean, that's one of the other things. It's just the concept of number two, which is just transferring the risk.
Well, I wanted to talk about number one.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to get in on that. Okay, so accepting the risk. I think of this as risk is around us all the time. You right now are, whether you like it or not, or understand this or not, you right now are already in risk acceptance mode. If you live in California on the San Andreas Fault, you accept that risk, whether you think you are or not. And when you realize that maybe you haven't, is when it starts rumbling. Maybe you get the earthquake that comes through, and
you're like,
now,
is this the time?
Everybody's talking about it. I'm paying attention to the risk that I always had right below me. And I think I think there's a lot of that happens in the market as well. And we see it when we see the sell-off in the market and the flight to safety starts to happen, and people start to move from equities and over into that bonds, because really they haven't done the planning around that. And maybe you took that risk on initially because it was a great job or the family was there, but at some point you may say, my location is not as important as my safety.
Well, and you're right there by even saying we're going from equities to bonds. Okay, that is the concept of number two, which is transferring the risk.
Right.
Right. I mean, that is saying, hey, listen, I'm done taking this risk. I'm going to move it somewhere else, and I'm going to theoretically take less risk. And I think that's one of the things, right? So we're always moving risk around, and that is the constant transfer. People buy something, they transfer risk somewhere, and then they accept that risk, and they accept it for a period of time, and they evaluate it, then they transfer it again. And
I think one of the misconceptions here sometimes, though, is that they are like that flight to safety or the moving over into bonds. Traditionally, it's a less risky, less volatile asset, but it still takes on a form of risk, which could be credit risk.
Yeah, credit risk.
That's what bonds are.
Yeah, I mean, there's liquidity risk. There's all sorts of different risks inside that piece, and it's just. But we transfer risk constantly, and I just again want to go back to the fact that I don't care what people buy or what they do or how they invest. I really don't.
Yeah.
But it's really about sitting down and trying to evaluate what you need. And if bonds are the way you want to go, we'll build the ladder you'll love.
I want to totally agree with you on that point. And here's one of the things that people might get the feeling that we have some kind of we've decided already what's appropriate for you. And that's not at all. Not at all. You are the person that decides. The client is the person that decides what's appropriate to take on in terms of the risk. identifying, understanding, and understanding those and having the conversations. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, Seth. I mean, I'm not even anywhere near there in my head, but, I think we have people come in all the time who are, high-end execs who, make a decent living and, have buyouts and things like that. And they're all risk on. I mean, their whole life is about risk. They're in the hugest part of their accumulation phase and they're rocking and rolling. And, they're not talking about CDs at the bank. I mean, that's just not where they're at. And, so that's one of those things. And I think that's kind of brings us to that fourth point, which is mitigation of risk, right? I mean, how do we, and we do this all the time. And I was just, we audit, train and teach and do all sorts of stuff with financial planners and in this firm. And I was just emailing a gentleman, that we supervise. I was just asking him, I say, listen, this percentage is just a little bit on the higher side. I just want to understand because, it's one equity purchase and it's fairly significant. And, I do actually agree with the investment strategy behind this, but percentage wise, there's a little bit lack of mitigation risk. Like why wouldn't we buy 3 or 4 different maybe stocks in this domain, and challenge them on that and try to get some background on that and the, communication. But at the end of the day, you sit down with a client and, daddy worked at that company and that's just what I want to own. And I owned it here and I'm buying it here. And so we have a little bit of that, story. So, but mitigating risk is really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that comes back to full circle where we were talking about, somebody's capacity for risk, and that's that first section of what do they need to solve for, the income piece and whatever their goal is and whatever comfortable is for them and solving for that. A lot of these pieces in this risk mitigation play a huge part in that solve, really, in that.
And bringing this all around too, just the concept of like the 3-dimensional piece that we talk about constantly, because people say, well, how does this apply 3-dimensionally? It's like, well, your risk is 3-dimensional because it's one thing today. It'll be something else later. And later on in life, it'll be even something else. And we're looking at those time horizon pieces and we're looking at the investment objectives. Like, are you in the accumulation phase?
Yeah.
Are you kind of in the preservation phase? Or are you just straight up in the distribution phase?
Yeah.
And really kind of trying to bring those pieces together because they all fluidly move together as one rope is pulling on the other. As you can see, the tension is kind of shifting as time goes on, right? And then, but your risk is also shifting at the same time, but your objectives are changing, and those kind of moving parts are just the constant ebb and flow of what we do on a daily basis. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about a conversation just the other day it was hilarious to me because the conversation comes up, of course, around risk, and they were identifying how they feel very risk on in their approach in the 401k, and they just are all in on that. But if you were to take a look at, their personal outside of the 401k assets, that's a totally different story. Like that has to go into some kind of a secure mode for them to feel comfortable around that. And I think that's that risk capacity piece as well. But another part of that that's interesting is that their hobby. What do they like to do? They like to buy Ducatis and ride Ducatis. So totally different level of risk in their personal life. Hey, this has been a really great topic for us. We hope that you've enjoyed the discussion about risk, maybe understanding and identifying some different places in your personal risk profile and your journey in financial planning and understanding, hey, I need to be okay with where I'm at financially. And that's a part in the story of your risk capacity. And then there's the other part of that as well, that maybe you're very risk on and you have assets that you really want to grow and develop outside of that nest egg that you've already developed over here or other areas of your life. Risk is it's all around us, and we're accepting it every day in different ways, whether we realize it or not. Ben and I run a risk all the time that the technology piece here may not work. And all the work that we poured into this show for you today would be for naught because we forgot to push record or something like that.
Hey, I'm still interested, Seth, in any of our listeners who have the most risky thing they've ever done. I'm really curious about all the risk out there on crazy stuff. I have a client who does some race car driving. So info@yourmoneyontap.com. Email us your risk story.
Sounds good to me. You have been listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Make it a great week, folks.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.